Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me for another edition of Talking About Naughty Dog and The Last of Us Part 2. I do apologize if this is redundant, but it just keeps coming in, and the story keeps getting more interesting, let's just say. So, previously we talked about how the Sony or Naughty Dog identified the leakers, plural, not one, but multiple, that they were not associated with Sony or Naughty Dog, which doesn't sound very likely because you do not have dev builds of a game and suddenly get out access to everyone unless someone actively knew who was a dev, who was at home, and how to get access to their home and their data. So not very likely. So the more likely story, if they are telling the truth, is that they were workers or people who worked at Naughty Dog and left the company at a certain point, so they weren't any longer affiliated with the company. So the fun thing about this is Neil Druckmann responded on social media. Isn't that great? Well, how about that? Avoid comments if you don't want spoilers. So he's replying to the Games Industry Biz posting that updated today, this morning, that Sony and Naughty Dog know who did it, or know the people who did it, and they weren't affiliated with each other. Great. And he continues, got this cleared up, but there are a lot of other false rumors out there. Looking forward to discussing all of this once the game is out. And boy, do we look forward to discussing that with you, Mr. Druckmann. We all want to know about who these people were, what you were paying them, what the bonuses were, whether the senior staff got bonuses, what is the agenda you had in mind for these characters. Were the artists, were the designers, were the writers allowed to voice their opinion? Who got fired? All these wonderful questions. And you can respond to him if you like on Twitter. He's not going to say anything, of course. But all you get is a lot of people saying, oh, we love you. Oh, you're crazy. The typical stuff on Twitter. Most people are going to bash him. So, have fun. Don't go crazy. Obviously, I don't want anyone to attack anyone for any reason online. But, he's got how many likes? Almost 8,000 likes. All kinds of retweets. Big popular dude, being the VP of Naughty Dog. So there is a YouTuber by Memology 101 who jumps on these stories rather quickly. He's very good. The person who leaked it had access to several builds of The Last of Us 2 and access to data that only devs have. So here's an image of, and if you ever see the actual video, if you want to be spoiled, go ahead, but I haven't done it. But there's all these numbers and stuff running off on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, all these other colors and things happening on the screen. So it looks like it's an unfinished build, or there are filters or other such controls to help devs test their game. So that's not a finished product, obviously. So clearly someone got hold of a dev build that, and they knew how to use these controls, these console commands, if it were. So it's more than likely it's a dev. I don't think most people who have access to a dev kit for PS4 would know how it to work. So you'd have to have software as well as hardware for this stuff to run. It wouldn't just be, hey, I stole a disc, I can play it in PS4. It's not how it works. You would have to get a dev kit for whatever platform you're building. So if you're building for Xbox, Microsoft would send you a dev kit Xbox, etc., etc. So that's right. Sony has no idea who leaked the game. Right. All they did is claim to know who did it. Do they really think people are that naive? Well, if you don't know much about the game industry or building games, then yeah, people would probably say that. But in reality, a lot of us do. And this is certainly not a standard build of a game. And if it were, there'd be a lot of problems over at Sony. So I don't doubt even for a moment that this leak came from the studio. This is the source from Sausage Roll. The Last of Us Part 2 is very divisive, and as you can imagine, some of the teams aren't really thrilled to be working on the game. So again, very good questions we could ask Mr. Neil Druckmann there. How well organized, how happy was the team in development? The source goes on to indicate the work environment could be the cause of the leak. They explain the team is very much divided on the game. Even voicing your concerns on a story will upset certain individuals. It results in said person being called closed-minded, even phobic, or some such nonsense. We heard about this before. So, yeah, it seems pretty similar. Now, what's interesting to know is everyone is under an NDA. So the leaks that do come out are either breaking that NDA or they've been fired and they have no reason to care, unless there's a clause in the contract that regardless of being fired, you have to keep your mouth shut. What's really sad is about nobody is allowed to talk about any of this. Many employees have left Naughty Dog because in-house politics, and they are under a strict NDA and absolutely cannot discuss the studio's production's practices, secrets. Oops. So that goes the same for Neil Druckmann and pretty much everyone involved, especially the gaming news sites who get advanced copies to do the reviews on time. There's an embargo of data right before, I think it's 24 hours before it gets lifted, so that they can do a post on their site. They can do video reviews, they can do video interviews, they can do all sorts of things to showcase the game. They can do critic scores, etc. So that's typical standard practice. And if anyone were to break that, that would be horrible. That would be horrible for the game. That would be horrible for the news outlet. So NDA is totally legal. It makes perfect sense that no one's talking about it. It was primarily the senior team that left Naughty Dog, and to assume that it's because of long working hours is laughable. Anybody that's ever worked in game development knows that this is a crock of S-word. Since I can't remember, development has always been like this. Get to work, chug coffee, and don't leave until you've completed the task and you've been assigned for the day. It's a part of the fun. It's a part of the lifestyle. What's not fun is working in a toxic environment. So this sounds like typical crunch. So on top of crunch, you have all these people that don't allow you to be creative, don't allow you to question others, don't allow you to say, hey, why is Abby so masculine? Why is she so buff? What is the style of art we're going for? What have you done to Joel, etc., etc. So all these questions about creativity you can't really go on about. This was the leak on Reddit that was recopied here. So it's the same that we've read before. So yeah, and this is also the same story in regards to Druckmann talking about how he fired a focus tester. And then the same presentation, he talks about Anita Sarkeesian's Tropes versus Women. So here's an actual former Naughty Dog employee, and this was an animator, which is a little different than a designer, a little different from a level designer as well, and especially very different from a developer. So animator Jonathan Cooper, who worked on The Last of Us Part 2 and Uncharted 4, and this was this was posted last month in March the 12th, also detailed that Naughty Dog threatened to withhold his paycheck unless he signed additional paperwork stating, I wouldn't share their production practices. Now, why would a company, after someone's been done his work, his task, he's done all his job, product is over, product is finished, you can go on to better things. Oh, we're not going to give you your last paycheck though. It's like, well, wait, why not? Because we don't want you to talk about the stuff. It's like, okay, that's weird. So when I left Naughty Dog late last year, they threatened to withhold my final paycheck until I signed additional paperwork stating I wouldn't share their production practices. Stating production practices or methodologies or software development schedules should not be a big deal. In the software industry, there's different kinds of products, there's different kinds of industries within software, and stating I use the Scrum model or the Agile methodology or what have you is kind of normal. It's not a trade secret. This is how we make software these days. So there must be something going on there they don't want to share. And I highly doubt it's going to revolutionize the industry or it's going to make other companies jealous. Oh, you got to copy that. Nothing like that. Not at all. This should be standard stuff. So there must be something bad going on. They finally relented when I assumed that when I assured them that that was most likely illegal. So yeah, they finally gave in and say, you can't withhold my pay or else you're going to have a world of hurt. There's quite a few laws protecting workers who don't get their pay and they've done the job. There are quite a few. So this guy's like, well, are you sure you want to go down this rabbit hole with me? It's like, I don't think it's a good idea, Naughty Dog. So the truth is, I have no awful crunch tale. The story animators, as we were known, were averaging 46 hours a week when I left, and I personally never went over 55. Okay, so these are story animators. I'm assuming these are cutscene animators. These are either real-time engine renderings or baked renderings, so fully rendered. So a typical work week is 8 hours times 5. So that's 40 hours. So he was averaging 46. Okay. So that's 9 hours Monday to Thursday, and then 10 hours on a Friday, or however you average that. And I personally never went over 55. Okay. That's getting pretty long. Not like, 16-hour workdays. But that's pretty long. And maybe that is what you expect for the end of a project. And this was late last year, so this is November, December, where they're getting the finishing touches on the videos, the real-time cutscenes, what have you. So I can understand that. And I don't know how long this guy's been working on the project. Usually contractors, they do the extra effort. They do time and a half. They do overtime for whatever they were given. So either they extend their contract by the extra week or the extra month, whatever. They get overtime pay. They get overage pay. So that's normal stuff, especially when you're a contractor. With your full-time, that's a different story. There's different rules that apply. The story team is super organized and reacted to whatever was thrown at us. That's not to say others weren't suffering. So he's not saying whether it's others in the story team that were suffering or others in the rest of the production were suffering. But either way, 46 hours is still more than the average, and he was averaging 46 hours, and he never went over 55 hours. That's still a lot of time, and I would argue that is crunch for him. And that's just one aspect of development, or one aspect of production. For the demo shown last September, the gameplay animators crunched more than I've ever seen and required weeks of recovery afterwards. One good friend of mine was hospitalized at that time due to overwork. He still had over half a year to go. There have been others since. So this is not untypical, meaning we've heard of this before. We've heard this with BioWare teams, with Andromeda and Anthem, them having to literally stop working, and you have to stop, you have to go on vacation now, or you could suffer serious injury. That's how much stress they were going through. So if you think, he's just an animator for cutscenes, for storytelling stuff. He's saying how much worse it got for the gameplay animators. These are animators making assets for the game, not the developers who have to use these assets to make the game work. This is just for them to make the animations in the models that will run across the room or what have you. So those are just designers. Those are the visual aspects. Just imagine what the coders have to do to make everything work and go back and forth between the animators and making sure things are tweaked. The reason I left is because I only want to work with the best. That is no longer Naughty Dog. Their reputation for crunch within LA is so bad, it was near impossible to hire seasoned contract game animators to close out the project. As such, we loaded up on film animators. So they couldn't even get the proper guys to do the job for what they were paying them, and probably because no one wanted to work with Naughty Dog. It's great to get a contract job because most jobs in the game industry are contract. So there's people who don't want to do it. And he's like, nope, Naughty Dog is not the best. I don't want to work there anymore. While super talented, they lack the technical design know-how to assemble scenes. Similarly, the design team ballooned with juniors to make up for the attrition of key roles. Every aspect of finishing this game took much longer due to the lack of game experiences on the team. That sounds extremely similar to what happened with BioWare Montreal, with the animators that were called in because everyone kept quitting. It wasn't fun. It was too stressful. They weren't getting enough out of their job. Don't get me wrong, these kids are mostly awesome and the best were great. It's just when the junior-senior ratio is out of balance, things can really grind and more time is spent training than actual working. LA teams make sure and pick them up when all the contracts end. So that means when the contractors have done their fill, when they say, okay, there's no more negotiations, there's no more extensions, I'm done, whatever, the senior guys, the actual teams that are there for full-time salary, have to pick up the slack where the contractors couldn't finish. That sounds brutal. Usually you hire contractors for specific jobs that your individual team that's on full-time can't do for whatever reason. They're not skilled, or there's just too much work. And it sounds as if the contractors couldn't finish the job. And these are, and to his knowledge, he's only in that one team. It's the story animators, which he's a contractor of. Contract work is a huge part of the LA ecosystem to ship large games. Unlike game design, there's a thriving animation industry here, and seasoned animators can often choose their projects. Most of the contract story animators quit last year. So the people they get to do very specific jobs, very specialized jobs, that they themselves can choose for because they're so in demand, most of them quit last year. Around his time, he quit. Those that don't can be at Naughty Dog for 2 to 3 projects with pauses in between, and while paid overtime, never receive benefits or the security of a full-time gig. That's one of the differences between full-time and contract. You don't get benefits. You get slightly higher pay. You might get a few perks here and there. You get overtime pay. You might get time and a half pay, but that's it. It's just cash. This is the way the industry is moving, so workers need more protection rather than the carrot of a full-time job one day. Yeah, so the hope is that you do get a full-time gig, but that more than often than not, that doesn't work. It's usually after you've done your gig on a contract, you're done. And that's not just video game, that's all of software. If you're a contractor, you're a contractor. For most of my career, I've been a contractor, and that's how it goes. Yeah, you might have some good relationship with some companies, you might burn some bridges with some companies, but for the most part, you're looking for another job every few months. There are Naughty Dog stories worse than this, but like everything on my Twitter, I'm focusing on animation. For the gaming fans, the game should turn out great with industry-leading animation. So he's only referring to the animation because he knows what he did. I would just not recommend anyone work at Naughty Dog until they prioritize talent retention. So what he's saying is, I wouldn't recommend working there because they don't keep you there. They don't want you there. They don't build up enough reasons for you to have a life and you to have a good work environment. And I guess that's harder in the gaming industry than it is in the rest of the entertainment industry, but gaming especially. So I don't think Naughty Dog is especially egregious. I just think they are, because they're AAA, there's a lot of pressure on them, and they hire so much talent and so many animators and so many developers and designers that there's just more stories about them. Ultimately, their linear games have a formula, and they focus test the shit out of them. While talented, their success is due in large part to Sony's deep pockets, funding delays, rather than skill alone. A more senior team would have shipped The Last of Us 2 a year ago. Wow. An entire year. I think this game took, what, 3-4 years to make? I don't even know. And if they had a more senior team, probably a full-time senior team, this game, based off the storytelling animator alone, that department would have been done a year ago. So that means that the animation itself, like baking the animation or testing the animation, focus testing it, talking with developers, having the seniors know all the ins and outs of the software, would have been done 365 days earlier if they just knew how to keep their employees. To me, that's incredible. If you are holding back a development by a year because you're hiring the wrong people or untalented people, can you imagine the LinkedIn requests or the Craigslist requests or whatever HR department or firm they're using? It's like, do you know animation? Come on down. We want you here at Naughty Dog. And we're going to stress the crap out of you. We're going to pay you next to nothing because you're a junior, but you're going to be working on all the hard stuff. So there's a huge learning curve. There's barely any benefits, and they're going to work you till your ass falls off. That's sad. I do know it's bad in the game industry. I didn't know it was that horrible for a AAA title. I only know stories from BioWare because that's where my focus of my channel is on. But wow, what a wonderful and horrible story to tell about Naughty Dog and what's happening. And I just hope the game is good. That's all I hope. I hope everyone who worked on the game feels great that they worked on something great. I hope the gamers get it. Like, this is all bad for everyone. No one wants to hear these stories. No one wants to have bad media be produced, but that's what it looks like it's going to happen. So fingers crossed, guys. Thanks for listening, and have yourself a good one.